Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sarah Dunnigan. Myself and John Bateman are the co-chairs of the Economic Development Alignment Subcommittee supporting the TAC. We'd like to welcome you to this inaugural meeting, both members of the subcommittee and members of the public who have joined us for this discussion. I'd like to open the meeting with a roll call. Sarah Dunnigan, present. John Bateman.
Present.
Kate Gibson / Denise Nelson. I think we've got, I see Denise.
Present.
Thank you. Dr. Troy Hartley.
I'm here. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Bob Lazaro. Louis Lawrence or Curtis Smith representing MPPDC.
I'm here. This is Louis.
Okay, great, Louis. Glad you're here. Stephen Murray.
Here, sir.
Thank you. Georgie Marquez.
Here, present.
Thank you. Is that correct? Is it Georgie, IE?
Yes, it's IE, Georgie.
Okay, I just wanted to make
Thank
sure.
you.
Emily Steinhilber.
Yes.
Thank you. Dr. Robert Weiss.
Present.
That is fantastic. We have 100% perfect attendance for our inaugural meeting. That's a good way to start a trend. John is just gonna, yes.
Sorry, Kate Gibson and Curtis Smith have also joined us.
Yes. Okay. All right, we have extras. That's great. I didn't know if those were going to be in either or if each of them were recognized as a member. So thank you for that. Because of these unusual times, we are holding our meeting today virtually. And so John is going to read a statement regarding our ability to use this virtual meeting platform for the purpose of conducting business. So John, you got us?
Gotcha. Good afternoon. I'd like to call this virtual meeting of the Virginia Coastal Resilience Master Planning Framework Technical Advisory Subcommittee for Economic Development, aligning economic development to order. Generally, public bodies are prohibited from meeting electronically under the provisions of the Freedom of Information Act. However, emergency language approved by the Governor and General Assembly in April allows us to move forward with certain restrictions that I will outline below. Before I review those provisions, please let me take a moment to review how this meeting will work. We want to allow for participation by committee and subcommittee members, staff, and members of the public who wish to comment. However, it's essential that we are able to manage the conversation effectively. While the meeting will be open for committee, subcommittee comment, due to the challenges associated with the electronic meeting, we want to allow members of the public to be heard. If you would like to make a comment, please do so in the chat box. Staff will be monitoring the chat box so when someone has submitted a comment, we will address your comments as time allows. Please be patient with us as we work through this. We understand and appreciate the challenges. Again, I have to read the introduction for a virtual meeting. This is long, but it's required to be read aloud under Chapter 1289 for all electronic meetings. Chapter 1289 of the 2020 Acts of Assembly, also known as the Budget Bill, includes language addressing the ability of public bodies to conduct electronic meetings without the need for a quorum being present in a single physical location, i.e. electronic meeting. This language was submitted as an amendment by the Governor and approved by the General Assembly at their April 22nd, 2020 reconvened session. The Governor subsequently signed the budget bill, and the bill was effective as of July 1st, 2020. The budget bill allows bodies to hold electronic meetings when the Governor has declared a state of emergency pursuant to Section 44-146.17 if the nature of the declared emergency makes it impracticable or unsafe for the public body or governing board to assemble in a single location, or the purpose of the meeting is to discuss or transact the business statutorily required or necessary to continue operations of the public body and the discharge of its lawful purposes, duties, and responsibilities, Section 4-0.01 G. The budget bill also has language regarding recordings and transcriptions of electronic meetings. Please be advised that this meeting is being recorded. The recording will be available to the public through the SNR website. That's the Secretary of Natural Resources website. The comments in the chat room will also be preserved as a public record. Official minutes of this meeting will be drafted and posted in accordance with regular procedures. The minutes will also include the type of electronic communication means by which this meeting is being held, in this case, WebEx. The budget bill does not allow the subcommittee or committee to hold an electronic meeting to discuss or transact business for any purpose. Rather, they may do so as long as the agenda items that the public body plans to take up are A, statutorily required, or B, necessary to continue operations and discharge lawful purposes, duties, and responsibilities. It is the committee's responsibility to determine whether the nature of the declared emergency makes it impracticable or unsafe for the public body or governing board to assemble in a single location. At the conclusion of my remarks, I will ask for a motion for the subcommittee to make this determination. If that motion fails, this electronic meeting will end at that point. The budget bill requires compliance with the provisions of section 2.2-3708.2. Therefore, in accordance with section 2.2-3708.2, public bodies must include a telephone number that may be used to notify the public body of any interruption in the telephonic or video broadcast of the meeting. In the event that that disruption occurs, participants should contact staff. And I'm going to ask Sarah or Katie to jump in real quick. Katie, your contact information.
Yes, sorry. If you have any questions, you can email me. My email is Katie, katie.salee@governor.virginia.gov, and I can put that in the chat for you.
Thank you. Additionally, if there is an interruption in the broadcast, the meeting must be suspended until public access is restored. Those provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act not addressed by the budget bill remain in effect. Before we continue with the business portion of the meeting, we've already conducted a roll call. So I will now turn to the subcommittee chair to present a recommended motion and wait for the board to request the motion and second and approve it.
This is Bob Lazaro. I'm sorry I was a little bit late. So move the motion, sir.
This is Denise Nelson. I second it.
All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Excuse me. I think, unfortunately, we need to do a roll call vote for each action by the subcommittee, just to make sure telephonically it's a little difficult to assure that we've got a vote captured.
Thank you.
So if it's okay, John, I'll just go ahead and read the roll and capture that vote. Sarah Dunnigan, affirm. John Bateman.
Affirm.
Kate Gibson. And again, this is to approve the motion to conduct business electronically due to the conditions and under the process that John just described.
This is Denise Nelson. Today, Kate and I are sharing a chair, and I vote aye.
Okay, thank you so much. Dr. Troy Hartley?
Aye.
Bob Lazaro?
Aye.
Louis Lawrence?
Aye.
Curtis Smith?
I'm the alternate for Louis, sharing a chair with Louis.
Okay. Stephen Murray?
Aye.
George Marquez?
Aye.
Emily Steinhilber?
Aye.
Dr. Robert Weiss?
Aye.
Thank you. I know that's a little awkward, but I do think that's important that we make sure we capture all those votes.
And one more paragraph, Sarah.
Thank you.
All right, I want to explain further how we will handle participation by subcommittee members, staff, and the public. Everyone except the individual presenting materials for an agenda item will be muted. Once the presentation is completed, the subcommittee members and only the subcommittee members will be unmuted for discussion and may indicate their desire to comment by raising their hand or commenting in the chat box. Staff will assist me and ensure subcommittee members are recognized when they have questions or comments as needed. Staff will be unmuted to address questions or concerns. Members of the public will be able to ask questions and provide input by utilizing the chat box function only. As time allows, we will respond to those questions and comments in that function. Public comment will be taken from those who signed up in advance during the last 30 minutes of the meeting. The public comment checkbox is in the registration email invitation. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you. And moving forward, we won't need to give quite that much background, but we want to make sure we're covered. We will need to take a motion at the beginning of each meeting just to conduct business using this wonderful technology. So as I don't know if I introduced myself. My name is Sarah Dunnigan. I'm the Deputy Director for Go Virginia and Economic Development, and I am with the Department for Housing and Community Development. I volunteered to help lead this discussion and the work of the subcommittee along with my partner, John Bateman. John's with the Northern Neck Planning District Commission and has just a breadth and depth of experience in this topic. So I'm really glad to be working with him. Each subcommittee needs to have a secretary. We do have wonderful staff support, but we would like to request that a member of this subcommittee volunteer to serve as secretary and basically help us in capturing meeting minutes. And John and I philosophically both agree that we don't need a transcript. The meetings are being recorded, but just in instances where there is a vote taken, for example, or something substantive, we need to have a physical written record of that. So do you have any volunteers?
I'd make a suggestion that we could have someone volunteer each week to do it or be on a rotating basis.
Any discussion by the members?
I'm sorry, I couldn't understand what John was saying.
Denise, I think he was suggesting that if you wanted to volunteer, you could do it on a per meeting basis, that maybe you wouldn't be committing to be the record keeper throughout this process, which we'll describe in a little bit more detail in a minute. And maybe that would help in terms of commitment. We envision this subcommittee meeting monthly. May need to meet a little more frequently if something comes up, but so it would be for a meeting each month leading up to the development of the master plan, which we expect to be completed by year end or just shortly thereafter. So that's generally the commitment.
May I just suggest that Sarah or John, you assign someone new at the start of every meeting?
So you'd rather be voluntold? We'd be happy to do that. And again, it's just difficult to conduct the meeting. We've got Katie is back actually kind of running the IT and assuring we've got all systems go there. So I would like to volunteer Denise Nelson take the meeting minutes for this inaugural meeting.
I would love to.
Thank you, Denise. I love that commitment, just leaning in. That's great. Okay, John is going to give us a little bit, and I saw Admiral Phillips may be on as well. We wanted to give folks who perhaps did not know, and all of you likely do, just a little overview of the master plan development, the role of the TAC, the subcommittee's relationship to that, and generally a timeline we're going to be working under. So John, you want to cover that for us?
Yeah, 1 second. I'm trying to pull up the. Do I have the ability to screen share? Hold on 1 second. Bear with me. I'm trying to pull up the presentation, the short presentation that had that information in it.
You can have the ability to share your screen.
Let's see if I can find it. I'm having difficulty finding it. Sarah, you had received an email from Anne with a 2-pager that showed the timeline. Do you have that readily available? Because I can't seem to find it. I'm sorry, were you speaking, Sarah? I didn't hear you. You were muted.
Seems to be the theme this year. The PowerPoint presentation dated December 14th.
No, it was a sooner one. She said she had sent out like a 2-page document, and I thought that I had it here, but I'm all of a sudden I'm not finding it.
The framework 2-pager.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can certainly share that. It's a Word document, or I'd be
Yeah.
happy to talk through it.
Yeah, that maybe do that. And then I can talk specifically about this subcommittee and how the secretary and thought it would its role. What its role would be.
Okay, that's great. Okay, so hopefully everybody has a little bit of awareness of the development of the master plan. The primary objective, of course, is to improve the Commonwealth's resilience and ability to adapt to rising seas, increase nuisance flooding, more frequent intense storms. If you've read the full plan framework, which was released really last October, and I encourage you to do that. It's a pretty heavy document, but I thought it was very helpful. But the framework has really 5 guiding principles, and I think principles, as subcommittee members, we need to know and understand. The guiding principles are 1, acknowledging climate change and its consequences and base decision making on the best possible science. So, in the context of economic development and aligning efforts, I think that's one guiding principle. Identifying and addressing socioeconomic inequities and work to enhance equity through coastal adaptation and protection efforts. Recognizing the importance of protecting and enhancing green infrastructure, including natural coastal barriers, fish, wildlife, habitats, etc. Utilizing community and regional scale planning. And I think the emphasis on regional scale, I think this is a really important opportunity for us in thinking about economic development at the state, regional, and local level, as there's a lot of kind of shared practices. Looking for region-specific approaches, but yet tailoring to the needs of individual communities. And then lastly, understanding the fiscal realities and focusing on the most cost-effective solutions for production and adaptation of not just communities, but businesses and critical infrastructure. So I won't go through the entire document. We will share it. There are really 4 goals that are hoped to be achieved prior to the completion of the plan. And, I think our role in the name of this subcommittee kind of says it all. And that is, how can we align economic development activities with those kind of very broad goals described in the framework and guiding principles. The committee, and John, I don't want to steal too much of your thunder, but it's just a little bit of a segue. Our job, as described in the document, is really to recommend a process by which public and private economic development activity in coastal Virginia can be aligned with the principles and goals of the Coastal Resilience Master Plan. So really understanding the principles and goals of that planning effort should be kind of foundational, I think, to some of our discussions. In terms of timeline, as I mentioned, this document, the master plan in its totality, we hope to deliver that by the TAC by the end of the year, certainly prior to the end of the administration. So our goal is to support the TAC and make recommendations and feed them content and the benefit of all of your expertise in the development of the plan. John, you want to add anything to that?
I think that's pretty well covered, Sarah.
Okay.
I say that the next agenda item was the role of the subcommittee, and I say we open it up to discussion based on the information you just provided.
Anybody have any comments or questions about that?
So John, I don't know how to see, but I'm having a little trouble hearing some of your audio. I don't know if maybe turning off video would help with that at all.
Yeah, I guess I could try that. But I'm bound to have issues. Broadband is an issue on the Northern Neck and
Yes.
low bandwidth. So bear with me, please. Let me know if there's something that you think I missed, and I can always repeat myself.
You are much better now. So if you wanted to rephrase what you said before, Sarah asked if there were any questions about that. Thank you so much, John.
No, I was going to make the suggestion that we discuss in the sense of how the secretary and Ann Phillips had envisioned this subcommittee, what their goals to be, that we discuss as a group what our goals are and how we view the development of the master plan from an economic development perspective.
Lots of shy folks on the call this afternoon. Well, that's okay. We're gonna lay some of this out in some documents, and I have a feeling that our discussions are going to shape in some ways the contributions that are going to be made, by this subcommittee. I can tell you personally, I think economic development is really central in many ways to the overall development of the master plan. And John and I discussed a little bit before this meeting a couple of tracks I think we might kind of think about economic development relative to coastal communities. One being around business continuity, which, in economic development terms is just retaining and growing existing businesses. And we know currently there are businesses that are affected by sea level rise, intermittent flooding, transportation interruptions due to water. And so just making sure that our existing businesses are prepared, resilient, and understand some of the challenges and opportunities of operating in coastal communities is one. The second, which is, what I call the making lemons made out of lemons, is the fact that coastal Virginia, because of this, this issue, is uniquely positioned to really be a central place where water technologies can be developed, this resilience economy, and in part because this is just a wonderful place to test and develop some of those new technologies. We've got some unique assets, I think, in coastal Virginia that make this a place that is also ripe for developing this industry cluster. So I'll just toss that out maybe as a conversation starter to the group. Do you guys think that those two tracks or frames are an appropriate for this conversation? Is there anything that we're that we're perhaps missing?
John Bateman, go ahead. Whoever was going to speak, go ahead.
Okay.
I would like to share something. I didn't know there's no raise your hand button here. So this is Georgie Marquez. And I'm wondering, are we going to consider also the whole infrastructure of things like utilities? I mean, you mentioned, Sarah, you mentioned transportation, but the issue of utilities, those types of things, and just the energy and the cost of all these things, and the need to actually improve that and can just make them resilient. And construction is such a big factor in this region that economic development should really include that also as part of what it would do to small and large businesses, the impact of the changes that need to occur in our region as a result of this plan and of what we're going to be proposing. So it's not just prevention, but also the proactive of this is what we recommend that be done, and how can then local businesses, both small and large, provide or meet the needs that we will identify.
I think that's a great point. Yeah, transportation and other infrastructure projects was the description, and I do think a recognition of the importance of all of that infrastructure, right, and supporting, economic activity, does need to be considered.
Sarah, this is Louis. It may be helpful to continue to expand out on the definition of what economic development means. In the context of the planning world, we are academically ingrained that it's the creation of jobs. But you have so many different perspectives and professional silos that many people on the phone call come from, that their definition of what economic development means is going to be something very different.
Yeah, I think that'd be a really good, maybe grounding discussion for the group. So what is economic development? Louis' right. I think most of us in the field would say, some type of activity that either creates a job or creates a job or supports the creation of a job, creates wealth in communities. Anyone else have a definition they'd like to toss out there?
So Sarah, this is Emily Steinhilber. I think in this particular field, we should also carefully consider retention of jobs. To follow up on Georgie's statement, expansion of existing capacity as well. So one of the things, and I know we've, especially with Troy on the call as well, spoken about this over the years, is to maybe in your second track of opportunity in water tech, to look both at the innovation side and then at the existing capabilities side, and then focus on the retention on the business continuity piece as well.
John Bateman, and kind of following up on some of Sarah's initial comment and what Louis said, I know our region very much looks at resilience as an economic development opportunity. We see industries already that have cropped up in that space, whether it be shoreline contractors trying to create resiliency on individual properties with shoreline management, in other areas. So we see entire industry clusters cropping up in the industry sector, or the resilient sector. That's kind of how we view economic development, in addition to making sure our current infrastructure and businesses are resilient.
That's really helpful. Does anybody else have any comments?
Stephen Murray had a comment at BEDP, thinks economic development is policies and programs designed to encourage growth in jobs, wages, and capital investment. That's important. Thank you, Stephen.
Yeah, I think one thing that we would also might want to consider, this is Georgie again, is the attraction of, you know, people to move into the area. So the growth of the area, not just from the inside. So not just looking at who's here right now, but also the potential of as the area develops. I know that in the chamber, we always talk about trying to get people to move to the area, companies to come to the area and open, and so create new jobs and new opportunities that way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Which kind of ties to the capital investment that Robert was mentioning in his comment.
Robert Weiss entered a comment. I just want to make sure everyone's following along. Maybe we should also engage stakeholders across the Commonwealth, what is important in the area of economic development. And Stephen expands that, you know, you think about policies and programs, and I think he's really talking about creating the right business environment, right? So it includes also education, workforce development, infrastructure, coastal resiliency, tax, regulatory policies. I think that, yeah, we could probably go pretty far with the definition. One thing, when we kind of talk about next steps for this group, I will tell you, John and I noticed that it was a little bit maybe lacking in some of what we think about as a kind of a traditional economic development practitioner. We've got great representation from our planning district commissions and some subject matter experts just deeply understand the space. I think that I was interested in looking at the planning area, which I spent some time on the map today, kind of thinking about that. I mean, really everything from, you know, Northern Virginia all the way down, is that understanding the people and organizations operating in an economic development space in that whole study area might be something interesting for us to reflect upon as a subcommittee. I don't know if anybody gets a reaction to that.
I'm gonna go ahead and actually I'm gonna invite Steve, if you're able to speak, to maybe elaborate on what you had said in the comments, and to Robert's point that we should be looking at stakeholder engagement across the Commonwealth when it comes to economic development, because this is a statewide plan.
Yeah, I'm happy to elaborate. I mean, I think the reality is that if we start from the perspective that economic development is ultimately about activities that are intended to result in more jobs, improvement in wages and investment, then really you can imagine many things that, you know, that relate to that. And so I think I would sort of suggest having the definition of it itself is relatively streamlined, recognizing that, you know, all the specific examples I include in the chat are not even comprehensive. I mean, we could throw in many other things. We could also talk about, you know, what successful economic development looks like in each of dozens of different industry sectors. You know, you can just about, you can include healthcare. I mean, there's all kinds of things that ultimately, you know, impact it. So if the notion is what's the right way to define it, I would keep the definition relatively simple, but think about in the context of our work, how the particular types of activities and plans that we're doing or considering would impact the economic development of Virginia, either positively or negatively. I hope I answered your question.
Thank you. And to that extent, our work will be in tandem with several of the other subcommittees as they explore projects and financing options, so on and so forth.
Absolutely. And by the way, when we think about the actual activities, we kind of put them in two. I mean, there's lots of different ways to think about this, but we kind of think about it broadly as two major types of activities: business development and product development. Where business development is what people often think of as economic development, you know, recruiting companies or working to encourage expansions, marketing, incentives, basically working on transactions, if you will. And product development is really about creating a great, fertile environment for business. And that gets to infrastructure, education, workforce, healthcare, coastal resiliency, tax and regulatory policy, really everything that sort of is about the environment in which business can occur. And I think of that as really just creating fertile ground for all of the economic development activity to occur. Also, the kinds of things that Go Virginia does with startups and scale-ups, I would largely put in the business development, bucket, trying to encourage the formation and growth of individual business activities. I put most of the workforce development efforts, although maybe not all of them, in the product development side.
Thanks for your comment, Stephen. And to that effect, Sarah, we already have representation from Go Virginia here on this subcommittee, which I think is incredibly helpful. And I wanted to ask the other subcommittee members if you thought it would be valuable to undertake an exercise to identify where we can, which is the goal of this subcommittee, where public and private economic development activity can be aligned with the principles of the plan. Many regions, such as the Northern Neck Planning District Commission, have comprehensive economic development strategies. We're currently undertaking a process to update ours. It's going to have a heavy resilience bent to it. So perhaps there are opportunities to draw off of those types of plans. And then if there are suggestions for other stakeholders across the state, as this is a statewide master plan, that we should be engaging with, or potential other subcommittee members.
This is Denise Nelson. So for GWRC, Kate and I were officially on the list, but we did invite Jennifer Morgan from GWRC, Go Virginia Region 6, to join us today, so the three of us could decide who would be the best person if we were only to have one person on this subcommittee. So I just wanted to make sure we got a chance to introduce Jen Morgan and then see if she had anything to respond to John's comments.
Hi, everyone. Like Denise said, I'm the Region 6 coordinator for Go Virginia Region 6 and a employee of GWRC. Just to add to John, part of our G&D plan update this year will include references to both the Northern Neck SEDS and the Middle Peninsula SEDS. GWRC doesn't have a particular SED, so we're looking at using a previously funded Go Virginia framework plan as an alternative, but including coastal planning as a key component for our future G&D plan updates, especially through Troy and Emily's work over the next 2 years with our statewide competitive project.
This is Troy. Not sure this speaks straight to your question, John, but backs up a little bit and maybe asks a clarifying question of Stephen and Sarah. So I'm a very visual person, and Sarah, you were helping there when you started to talk us through about tracks. How could we organize this analysis and then also whatever deliverable we create? And you started with saying there are this sort of business continuity, community, and retaining and growing existing businesses. There's the emerging innovations and solutions that are leading to new businesses or new ideas. And then somebody added, I think, this idea of we're also trying to attract new companies, right, into the state that are maybe completely outside of resilience. That's not what they do as their economics. So you sort of have these three pillars.
Yeah.
And then I started to hear us talking about incentives and drivers for each of those. These policies and programs are all trying to nudge those, the performance in each of those pillars in certain directions. And then, Stephen, you added another interesting layer that I'm trying to get my arms around a little bit. The sort of business development and product development is two separate kind of ideas, and maybe within those pillars. And I guess my clarifying question is, if you look at, say, business continuity, kind of retaining and growing existing businesses, but you separated those into the business development side or the product development side, would you have different policies and programs that are independent in each of those two areas so that you would walk through and we'd be looking at all the drivers and incentives, these policies and programs, and even infrastructure that might be driving economic development in that category, would they be different for those two, business development versus product development? And then is part of our charge to be thinking about those incentives and drivers as it relates to resilience and coastal adaptation.
My take is they could be different. I mean, usually I think about product development as something that would impact, all of the companies operating in a certain area. Now, certain aspects of it would be more important to them than others. So, for example, if you had companies that made physical goods, they experience the transportation network very differently than those that are just making, say, software, where people work from home and so forth. I mean, I think one way to think about it is not try to, not that you're suggesting this, but we can kind of end up trying to boil the ocean if we try to map it all out. I think, but more perhaps to think about how our particular topic ultimately impacts, these other, the various industry sectors of Virginia. And in that sense, it might be worth thinking about which ones, are more significantly impacted than others, and how might we structure this in a way that's helpful, or at least not unhelpful or damaging to them. I don't know if I'm responding to you correctly or not, but that was my thought.
Thank you. I think that's helpful. I think we are, as somebody mentioned, we're a pretty diverse community here, and so we're all kind of learning each other's language and mechanisms of trying to overlay the way you guys think in the economic development community with some of the ways that are emerging in the master plan conversations. And
I do think there's a very important overlap. There's a very important intersection, if you will, and that's why we're happy to participate in this, because I think when those things come up, they're going to be things we ought to really talk through and think about carefully.
I know that Mr. Lawrence and Mr. Smith are working with resilience and economic development, specifically on the Middle Peninsula. Louis, did you want to talk a little bit about some of the stuff you guys are doing and thinking about on the Middle Peninsula?
Yeah, I want to talk about probably through that lens of barriers to economic development and what we are actually seeing right now that is keeping the industry clusters that we are trying to prop up from being able to grow. And it has a lot to do with how projects at the residential scale are financed. So when you get out of the urban areas, practically 99% of all the shoreline is privately owned. So that means that resiliency projects that need to be built, whatever you're talking about managing water, however you want to manage it, is going to need a company to be able to do something in that space. And what we are repetitively seeing is banks will not lend for whatever that widget is because they don't understand it. They don't have any experience in being able to finance it. They don't know how to collateralize it. When we step in to be able to finance whatever the shoreline widget of the day is, that generally is predicated on reimbursement from the state. And the state requires that we have to have a cashed check to be able to receive reimbursement. So it's the same kind of trapped circle that you're always in, is how do you make liquidity flow? And without liquidity, the businesses can't grow. And so most of the businesses that are in the resiliency space now in rural communities are generally constricted by the inability to be able to finance projects. The average residential living shoreline that we're dealing with in the Middle Peninsula, anywhere between 75,000 to 250,000. So I would challenge any of you all here, what's your ability to write a check for $250,000? Immediately that gets you the scale problem that you have. And most of the businesses that are operating in this space are not generally going to front $250,000 on a residential scale project. So unless we can deal with that liquidity issue more effectively, we're going to have this built-in problem of trying to be able to grow the industry clusters if they can't get access to capital. Our PDC in particular has the only structured program in the Commonwealth right now where we have been collecting companies for the last year and a half that offer expertise in the flood mitigation space. And then we've created a virtual resiliency marketplace that connects those companies together with consumers that have need. And then in between those two spaces are all of the financing and insurance products that we've been able to bring into this virtual marketplace to help break loose that liquidity problem, to be able to finance projects at a higher scale so that the contractors that are in that space can get access to the capital that they need to be able to start the job.
Right.
And so that the system that we have created out of whole cloth is trying to force the economic development space to do something that it's not currently being able to do. So we are essentially stepping in as a market maker to help to remove some of those barriers to try to figure out what those individual companies need, and then how do we provide the financing and liquidity for either the homeowner or for the company to be able to grow and get the jobs done. So the way that we've approached it is very different. You know, we're trying to vertically integrate everything from the consumer scale all the way up to the state agency funding, and then to be able to streamline everything in between so that money and resources flow at all different times.
I think that's a great example of, you know, again, what this committee is charged to do, or subcommittee, is to recommend a process by which economic development activity can be aligned with the principles and goals of the Coastal Resilience Master Plan. So I would be curious, Louis, to talk to you about how you see that aligning, again, you know, with the principles. I think what we want to try to do is create stronger alignment with the plan principles and outcomes kind of across, right, institutions. And I think what you've shared is a fantastic best practice, right? It is aligned with this goal, which again, not all the goals have been laid out there, but making sure that we've got a vibrant coastal economy, right? If we toss that out there as a goal, your organization identified a barrier to business growth, this issue of access to capital. And so I think that's interesting and really, really good. Can we?
So the second part, to answer your question about how do we align it with the goals, that's pretty much driven right now by either the state statute for nature-based flood mitigation solutions, the guiding principles which require that, and FEMA's interest in nature-based flood mitigation solutions. So everything is driven in these rural communities either through the statutory requirements or the federal requirements.
Okay.
And Louis, this is John Bateman. Louis's comments really touch on 4 of the 5 guiding principles: acknowledging climate change and making decisions based on the best available science, nature-based solutions when it comes to living shorelines, utilizing a community and regional scale planning approach, and looking at cost-effective solutions. And that's the one, that last one that I mentioned is where I think Louis is really trying to drive home and find the solution to make these practices as cost-effective as possible, utilizing existing structures or creating new structures. I think what they're doing is trying to create a new structure for how they can approach these practices and make them more cost-effective.
Just in the name of time, we've got about 11 minutes, and I want to make sure we get through the rest of our agenda, because there's just a couple important things we need to get done as a body. I think these ideas are evolving, and I've taken some notes. And Troy, I love your idea always of a visual. With the support of the subcommittee, I'd like to take a stab at kind of these definitions and a framework to kind of come up with a charter, if you will, for the subcommittee. Just to make sure as we all start off, we understand kind of similarly what our objectives are and how we would like to contribute to this planning effort.
I think that's a great idea, Sarah.
Okay. And yeah, we can we'll share that and get feedback on that.
I think an additional request I would make of the subcommittee members is to think about, to Robert Weiss's point earlier, to think about stakeholders from across the state that should be approached for input. And if and I know that we have at least one vacancy on this subcommittee right now. But if there are any suggestions that any of the subcommittee members have for individuals that have an economic development background and may have from the lens of resiliency, input that would be valuable to the subcommittee, to please make that suggestion to myself or Sarah.
John, sorry. I wanted to note that Robert had also dropped something in the comments. He is the chair and the vice chair of the Studies, Research, and Best Practices Subcommittee. And we wanted to make sure that you were aware and that you, in developing that charter or in looking for other expertise, that subcommittee has members from most of the public universities, and we will be putting together priorities. So if there's anything that's of kind of especially a timely need from this subcommittee, please let one of us or both of us know.
Thank you, Emily.
And Sarah and John, you guys may want to track that across the board, right? Because most of us sit on a couple committees, so there could be some cross-fertilizing ideas that we'll just want to capture at different points in time.
Yeah, Troy, I think that's actually a great benefit to us. So we'll definitely be keeping an eye out and marking down those opportunities.
Okay, so we will, we've got access to all of the other subcommittee rosters, so we'll do a little cross-checking as well. But thank you, Emily. I can think of a couple things I'd be curious about, particularly thinking about just some big ideas here, which I think these are foundational, whether you call it product development, as Stephen describes, product being the place, right, and the business environment and all of the policies and supporting services, workforce, infrastructure, right? And we've talked about incentives and drivers, which we really have to, respond to when we're thinking about how companies grow. Additionally, removing barriers, right, to business growth. So all of those things. Thank you, Robert, for joining us, coming together. So we'll work on getting that framework etched out. We would love to have a couple of other members on the subcommittee. Think about your friends and neighbors. We can also bring in subject matter experts. So maybe as this framework for our work develops, we might think of some folks we want to bring in on an ad hoc basis as well. Future meeting schedules. How would you guys like to handle this? If we're going to meet once a month, what would be your preferred scheduling? I think John and I would prefer kind of a set date and time each month. How we get to that, I'll leave it open to the group.
You had everybody here on this day, at this time. That could be a standing monthly opportunity.
It would be the fourth Monday of each month at 3 p.m.
Do we always have 4 Mondays? I need to think about that a little bit.
Good question.
The last Monday of the month. Maybe that's another way to think about it.
I think there are 4 Mondays because that's when our board meets.
Okay. Is it at the same time, Denise or Kate?
We meet at 6 p.m.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. So we've got a recommendation from a member and I think concurrence from Kate and her team that the fourth Monday from 3 to 4 works. Everybody?
Great.
Okay. We made a decision together. That's great.
No roll call?
I don't know if we need to take a vote on that item. I think we're okay with that not being a consequential action by the body. I had on an item just assigned background reading. I think it is really important that we, share information. We've sent a little bit out to the committee, and I do want to make sure everybody knows that naturalresources.virginia.gov has a kind of a space that kind of is tracking the activities of the TAC and meeting dates, etc. I think I mentioned the master plan framework as a document that would be helpful. If there are others, I would just, ask that you guys maybe share them with the group, or we can get Katie to circulate those as well. And certainly folks that are on other subcommittees, if you feel like there's reading or activities where, this group's work is kind of intersecting, please let us know.
Could you refresh my memory on what our assignment is leaving this meeting and preparing for the next meeting?
Yes, so as members, as the member Sarah, I'm going to take your ideas and we're going to come up with kind of a charter for the subcommittee and specifically our role and a framework, I think, for our next discussion. There has been a request to identify additional members. So your other to do is to think about folks in your communities that may have some expertise to add to the effort. And I think the last item is for this committee to consider who the other stakeholders would be to this discussion. And I may have missed a task. So not too much homework this time. A little background reading if you're not already kind of refreshed with the effort. This is kind of our inaugural meeting. I know it's a little bit light on the heavy thinking. We're in the norming and forming stage. Okay. John, is it okay? I don't think we had anybody registered for the public comment period of this meeting, but
I think we'll take this time. I don't see any public comments in the chat. And I believe the only request for public comment came from a committee member.
Thank you, John. That's great. Does anybody have any additional questions? Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I'm sorry, who was that?
Emily.
Okay, thanks, Emily. We've got a motion from Emily. Do we have a second?
Second,
Second.
Georgie.
Thank you, Ms. Marquez. I'm going to take a roll call vote to close the meeting. Sarah Dunnigan, yes. John Bateman.
Aye.
Kate Gibson.
Aye.
Troy Hartley.
Aye.
Bob Lazaro. I think Mr. Lazaro had to leave. Louis Lawrence.
Yes.
Stephen Murray.
Yes.
Georgie Marquez.
Aye.
Emily Steinhilber. Dr. Robert White.
Yes.
Thank you. And just recognizing other attendees, alternates, Curtis Smith, Denise Nelson, and Jennifer Morgan are also in the room with us. I believe non-voting, since their primaries are here with us today. So with that action, the meeting is adjourned. We will meet on the fourth Monday of the month. Katie, do you have that close? Do you know what day that is? I don't have my calendar up.
It's 22nd of March.
Yes.
So if you'd like to pencil that in, we'll get a meeting notice out and we will be in touch with you. And I would like to recognize and thank Denise Nelson for serving as our secretary today. Thank you, Denise, for that. All right, so with that, we'll close the meeting. Everybody have a great day. Thank you.
Yeah. Bye.
Thank you.